Hello, I'm David Curtis from the Tibetan Language Institute. Welcome to this new series of videos. We're doing an ongoing group of recordings aimed at sharing with beginning readers of Tibetan some things about reading Tibetan, reading classical Tibetan, the language of the Buddhist texts. So this particular new series that we're starting right now is a short series on the dedication of beneficial activity prayer. This is a prayer written by Nagarjuna in the 2nd or 3rd century of our era in his book, The 60 Verses of Reasoning. And then it was translated into Tibetan and is now done by all schools of Tibetan Buddhism. The prayer is written in the form of the shloka. And previously, I recorded a small series of videos on the Refuge prayer, Refuge and Heart of Awakening, or Refuge and Bodhicitta prayer, in which I talk about the shloka format. So if you like, you can review that short series to learn about the shloka. But in any case, the dedication of merit is a shloka form and just written in the shloka form. And as such, it has 4 lines, and each of the lines has the same number of syllables. That's a standard feature of the shlokas. And as such, it can be broken down into 2 parts, a part A and a part B, we could say. So the first 2 lines are part A, and the second 2 lines are part B. So let's just jump right in and talk about line 1. So as we see on our screen here, we have underneath the title, Dedication of Beneficial Activity, we have the Tibetan on the left side, and then the English line-by-line translation on the right side. The line-by-line translation is just meant to be a guide to Tibetan. No translation is definitive, but it's designed here to help you read the Tibetan. And then further, on the right side of the screen, then, we have the first line of Tibetan, and then that line parsed in what we call a parsing box. So parse just means to analyze. So we're going to try to analyze syllable by syllable what we have in the Tibetan. And so the Tibetan within the box is written on the top line. And then the second line identifies the part of speech. And then the third line is a brief translation of that word or that couple words that are grouped together in that individual box. Okay, so we begin then by spelling. So to spell the first line of this dedication prayer, we have Ba-o-sa, Naro-so, Da-se, Na-ma-sa-nam, A-o-da, Gigu-di, Ya Gigu Yi Sa Yi, Ta Ma Sa Tam, Cha Da Che, Ga O Za Gigu Zi Ga Sa Zik, Pa Nya Gigu Ni Da Ni. Then we have the 2 shays, the vertical strokes at the end, indicating that is the end of a line of verse. It's not necessarily a sentence, but just an end of the line. Okay, so the standard way that we do it, again, is we spell out a given line, then we read that line out loud, and then we analyze it. So I've spelled it. Now to read it out, we would have Sunam Di Tamche Zigpa Ni. So I said that each line is going to have a set number of syllables, usually 7 or 9, sometimes 11. So a set number of, so here in line 1, we see that it's 9 syllables. Sunam, Diyi, Tamche, Zipani. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now we know because of the strictures of the shloka form that the remaining 3 lines are also going to have 9 syllables per line. And then each of those lines will be indicated, punctuated, as it were, by 2 shays, the vertical strokes at the end. Okay, so now we've spelled the first line, read the first line. Let's analyze it. So again, in the first box, then we have Sunam, Ba-o-sa, Naro-so-da-se, Na-ma-sa-nam, Sunam. So we've identified that as a noun here. So those two syllables make up a word, and the word can mean merit or beneficial activity, something like that. Okay. Then so in the box, so those two go together to make up a word. So they're in that mini box, within the greater box. And then the next two syllables, DE, what we have here. So the meter is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So here sunam go together, and then DE go together. Now D, this is a really common way for a binomial or a two-syllable construction to be made. D is a word. It's a demonstrative adjective here, and then ye is a particle. So this is very, very common. So then as the information tells us on the grammatical line there, D is what we call a demonstrative adjective, and then it's taught, these adjectives, the demonstratives, are taught in the Divine Tree Grammar poem on lines 58 to 60. So if you have the DT or the Divine Tree, then you can go there and learn more about these particles. Okay. And then that demonstrative adjective D, which means this, is followed by the instrumental particle ye, which can mean by, with, on account of, due to, many other things like that. And so modifiers come after the word they modify. So here we have by this, and then the this, odagikudi, as an adjective comes after the noun it modifies, and that is merit, of course. And so then altogether, so far we have by this merit. So that's making a lot of sense, sounding good. Okay. And then the next little box, we have tamasa tam, chada che. And I'll just talk about that for a moment. So tam che by itself is an adjective. And adjectives usually follow the word they modify. But here, something different is happening. So I'll go on and talk about the next word. Ga-o-za, gi-gu-zi, ga-sa, zik, pa, zikpa. That's the verb to see. So we've got all conjoined with to see, and then nya, gi-gu, ni, da, ni. That's a word-making particle or a lexical particle that can be translated off in English into English with the English suffix ness. So makes an abstract noun very often. Okay, so then we've got the concept of all with the concept of seeing with the concept of ness. So all seeingness, we could translate that as omniscience. That's a pretty good translation, I think, because omni means all in Greek, and science comes from the Latin root skio, to know. So it's an all-knowingness, but all-seeingness in English. Maybe. So omniscience really means all-knowingness. I don't know if we have a word all-seeingness, but that would be a little bit more literal. But I think omniscience then gets the meaning. So that's the kind of question, when we're translating, that we deal with all the time. We're trying, the most important thing is that we adhere to the meaning. What's the meaning of the Tibetan? And then we want to be as close to how Tibetan expresses that as possible. But because the languages are so different from each other, you can't make a strictly literal translation, or it would come out as gibberish in English. Okay, so now we have something by this merit, omniscience. So one thing that's helpful to remember is Tibetan is a language that usually expresses things in the order of subject, object, or principal qualifier, and then verb at the end. So we haven't had the verb yet, so that encourages us to go on to line 2. So we'll stop here for now with the treatment of line 1, and then in the next mini video, we'll talk about line 2.